It's getting real fast. And if you've been paying attention, you already know this situation might be closer to breaking than anyone expected. Because what's happening right now in Indiana doesn't feel like normal early season pressure. This feels different. This feels like a countdown. Right now, all eyes are locked on Stephanie White, and not in a good way. There's a growing sense, especially among fans and analysts, that the margin for error has completely disappeared. One bad decision, one questionable rotation, one more moment that doesn't sit right, and everything could flip overnight. Now officially, nothing has been announced. But if you look closely, the signs are hard to ignore. The tone around the team has shifted, the conversations are getting louder, and more importantly, the expectations have changed dramatically, because this isn't just any roster anymore. This is a franchise built around one of the most talked about players in the sport right now, Caitlin Clark. And when you're coaching a player like that, the rules change. It's not just about winning games anymore. It's about how you win, who you prioritize, and whether your system actually fits the player your entire organization is invested in. That's where things start to get uncomfortable. Because there's been a lot of buzz lately, with some reports suggesting internal pressure is building behind the scenes. Nothing confirmed, but enough noise to make people pay attention. And once that kind of pressure starts building inside an organization, it doesn't stay quiet for long. It turns into action. So the real question isn't whether Stephanie White is feeling the heat. It's how much time she actually has left before something changes. It's not just pressure anymore, it's a full-on spotlight. Right now, everything surrounding Stephanie White feels like it's being watched in real time. Every decision, every substitution, every post-game comment, nothing is slipping through unnoticed, and that's usually not a good sign for a head coach this early into a situation. Because normally, there's a grace period. Time to experiment, time to adjust, time to figure things out. But that doesn't seem to exist here. There's a growing belief among fans and media that the margin for error has completely disappeared. And while nothing official has been confirmed, the overall tone around the team suggests something is different. The patience that usually comes with a new coaching situation, it feels shorter. Much shorter. And a big reason for that comes down to who's on the roster. When you have a player like Caitlin Clark, expectations don't build slowly, they arrive instantly. The spotlight gets brighter, the timeline speeds up, and suddenly every decision isn't just about development, it's about maximizing something that's already here. Right now. That's why even small things start to feel bigger than they normally would. A rotation that doesn't make sense, a stretch of the game where the offense looks disconnected, a comment in a press conference that raises eyebrows. On their own, these moments might not mean much, but when they start stacking up, people begin to notice patterns. And once people start seeing patterns, the conversation changes. There's been a lot of buzz lately, with some reports suggesting that the organization is paying very close attention to how things are unfolding. Again, nothing officially confirmed, but enough to create a sense that everything is being evaluated more closely than usual. And that kind of environment, it changes how a coach operates. Because now it's not just about coaching the team, it's about proving constantly that you're the right person to lead it. And when that pressure kicks in this early, it usually means something bigger is already building behind the scenes. But this situation didn't just appear out of nowhere. Something had to trigger it. And then came the move that really made people stop and look twice. Because bringing in Lynn Dunn at this stage didn't feel random. On paper, it's being described as a consulting role, a veteran presence, someone with experience stepping in to support the coaching staff. And sure, that's how it's framed publicly. But if you look a little closer, it starts to feel like more than that. Because you don't bring in someone with that level of history, that level of authority, and that deep of a connection to the franchise, unless there's a reason. And that's where the speculation begins. There's been a lot of quiet conversation suggesting that this isn't just about guidance, it's about oversight, not in an official sense, but in a practical one. Someone who understands the organization inside and out, now positioned close enough to evaluate everything happening in real time. Practices, rotations, game flow, decisions. Everything. Now again, nothing has been confirmed beyond the official title, but the timing of it, that's what people keep coming back to. Because this kind of move doesn't usually happen when everything is running smoothly. It happens when there are questions. And more importantly, when there's uncertainty. Some observers believe this could be a safety net, someone already in place in case things don't improve quickly. Not necessarily a replacement today, but someone who could step in without disruption if needed. And if that's even partially true, it changes everything. Because now, it's not just pressure from the outside. It's internal, close, constant, and impossible to ignore. And imagine what that does to the environment. Every decision suddenly carries more weight. Every mistake feels bigger, because it's not just being judged after the fact, it's being watched as it happens. That's a completely different level of pressure for any coach, especially one who's already under scrutiny. So while the move might look simple on the surface, the message behind it feels a lot louder. And once you start connecting that move to what's been happening on the court, the situation becomes even harder to ignore. And this is where the real tension starts to show. Because when you strip everything else away, the noise, the speculation, the pressure, it all comes down to one core issue: fit. More specifically, does the system actually fit Caitlin Clark? That question has been quietly building for a while now. Throughout the season, there were flashes where everything clicked, moments where the offense looked fast, fluid, and exactly how fans expected it to look with a player like Clark running the show. But those moments didn't always last. And that's what people started noticing. There were stretches where Clark seemed less involved than expected, not completely out of the game, but not fully controlling it either. At times, she was off the ball. Other times, the offense flowed through different players while she spaced the floor. Now, to be fair, every system requires balance. No team can rely on one player every possession. But this situation felt different to a lot of viewers. Because Clark isn't just any player. She's the type of player the system is supposed to revolve around. And when that doesn't appear to be happening consistently, questions start coming up. Fans began pointing it out. Analysts hinted at it. Conversations started forming around whether the offensive structure was actually maximizing her strengths or unintentionally limiting them. Again, nothing officially stated by the team. But the perception, that's what matters. Because in today's game, perception spreads fast. There were moments where it felt like the system was asking Clark to adjust more than the system was adjusting to her, playing off the ball, acting as a spacer, even serving as a DK at times while others initiated the offense. And while that might work in certain situations, it raised a bigger concern. Are you building around your best player or asking your best player to fit into something else? That's a huge difference. And it's not just about style, it's about identity. Because when a franchise commits to a player of this level, everything is supposed to align around that decision. The pace, the spacing, the playmaking, all of it. So when that alignment doesn't feel consistent, even for short stretches, people notice. And once they notice, the pressure starts building even faster. Because now, it's not just about results. It's about whether the entire system needs to change. But the moment that really pushed this situation into overdrive was the hero ball conversation. Because this wasn't just about rotations anymore. This became about philosophy. At one point during a high-pressure stretch, Comments linked to Stephanie White suggested concerns about relying too heavily on isolation-style play, what many refer to as hero ball. And on the surface, that sounds reasonable. Most coaches want structure, ball movement, and balance. But the timing, that's what caught people's attention. Because those comments were being connected, at least by fans and media, to moments where Caitlin Clark was aggressively taking over games, hitting shots, creating offense, and trying to pull the team back into competitive situations. And that's where the reaction started. Online, a lot of fans pushed back, arguing that what was being labeled as hero ball was actually just star-level play, the kind of play you expect from a franchise centerpiece, the kind of play that made her stand out in the first place. Now again, nothing officially framed as criticism toward any one player, but perception took over quickly. And perception moves fast. Because at the same time, viewers noticed something else. There were stretches where other players were given extended freedom to take shots, even in less efficient situations, without the same level of visible frustration or commentary. That contrast, fair or not, became a talking point. Some critics began suggesting there was a disconnect in how different players were being evaluated. Not necessarily intentional, but noticeable enough to spark debate. And once that idea got out there, it spread. Vast. Because fans aren't just watching results, they're watching reactions, body language, comments, decisions in key moments. And when those things don't seem aligned, people start asking questions. Was the system holding Clark back, or was the coaching approach trying to reshape her game into something else? That's a difficult balance. Because on one side, you want structure. On the other, you have a player whose strength is breaking structure. And when those two ideas clash, tension builds. That moment, the hero ball discussion didn't create the pressure, but it definitely amplified it. And once that pressure hit the public conversation, there was no pulling it back. And this is where things move beyond basketball and into something much bigger. Because once the conversation reached this level, it wasn't just fans reacting anymore. It started to feel like the people in charge were paying attention too. Now officially, there hasn't been a dramatic announcement or public statement pointing fingers. But there's been a growing wave of reports and discussions suggesting that internal pressure is starting to build inside the organization. And when that happens, it usually means something serious is at stake. Because this isn't just any team situation. This is a franchise built around Caitlin Clark, a player who has already brought massive attention, ticket demand, and overall visibility to the organization. Whether people like it or not, that changes everything. From a business standpoint, the stakes are higher. From a brand standpoint, the expectations are higher. And from a leadership standpoint, the tolerance for mistakes is much lower. There have been moments, at least according to reports and ongoing discussions, where involvement from higher levels of the organization may have played a role in how things are being handled. Again, nothing fully confirmed, but enough to suggest that this situation isn't being left entirely to chance. Because when ownership starts paying closer attention, it's rarely random. It's usually a signal that the product on the court needs to match the investment behind it. And right now, that investment is significant. We're talking about a team that's no longer just developing quietly in the background. This is one of the most talked about teams in the league, with every game being watched, analyzed, and broken down in real time. That kind of spotlight creates pressure, not just for players, but for coaches too. Because now, decisions aren't just internal. They're public. And when those decisions don't align with expectations, it doesn't take long for that pressure to move upward toward the front office. That's why this situation feels different. It's not just about wins and losses. It's about alignment between the coach, the system, and the long-term vision of the organization. And if that alignment isn't there, changes don't take years. They happen fast. And that's exactly why the next move could come sooner than anyone expects. And this is where everything becomes crystal clear, because the job itself isn't complicated. It just comes with zero margin for error. At its core, the assignment for Stephanie White is simple: build a system that fully unlocks Caitlin Clark. That's it. Not partially, not occasionally, not in flashes. Consistently. Because when a franchise commits to a player of that level, everything else becomes secondary. Rotations, play style, offensive schemes, all of it is supposed to align with that one decision. And if it doesn't matter how many games you win in the short term. It's still viewed as a problem. And that's what makes this situation so different from a typical coaching job. Normally, a coach might get credit for developing role players, for squeezing out wins with unconventional lineups, for building a balanced system that spreads responsibility across the roster. But here, that's not enough. Because this isn't about balance, it's about optimization. And not just for one player. This is about building a system that works for both Clark and Aaliyah Boston at the same time. That's the real challenge. Creating an offense where both players can operate at their highest level without canceling each other out. That takes precision. And right now, that's the part people are watching most closely. Because if those two aren't clicking consistently, it raises bigger questions, not about talent, but about structure, about whether the system in place is actually designed for the roster or if the roster is being forced to adjust to the system. That distinction matters more than anything. Because in today's game, especially with this level of attention, you don't get multiple seasons to figure it out. You get moments, and every moment is evaluated. That's why even solid performances can feel underwhelming if they don't clearly show progress in that direction. It's not just about competing, it's about building something that looks sustainable at a high level. Something that works in big games, under pressure, against top teams. Because that's the expectation now. And if that expectation isn't being met consistently, then the conversation shifts very quickly from adjustments to changes. And this is where things start to feel complicated. Because when you look closely at everything happening, it doesn't just feel like a coaching issue anymore. It feels like something deeper, something internal. A possible disconnect. Now nothing has been officially confirmed, but there's been growing speculation that different voices inside the organization might not be completely aligned right now. And in situations like this, that can create tension fast. On one side, you have Stephanie White and her vision for how the team should operate. A system built on structure, balance, and spreading responsibility across the roster. On the other side, there's the direction the franchise appears to be moving toward. And that direction seems very clear. Everything's centered around Caitlin Clark. Now again, that doesn't mean there's open conflict. But when observers look at the moves being made, like bringing in Lynn Dunn, increasing internal oversight, and the growing pressure from outside, it starts to paint a picture. Some believe this could be a case of differing philosophies. Not necessarily personal, but strategic. One approach leaning toward a more traditional, balanced system, while the other is pushing for a faster, star-driven identity built around maximizing Clark's impact every single possession. And when those two approaches don't fully match, things get tense. Because in professional sports, you can't have a team pulling in two different directions. It creates hesitation, confusion, and most importantly, it slows everything down. And that's the last thing this team can afford right now, especially with the spotlight getting bigger every game. There's also been quiet talk that the old guard within the organization, people with deep history and experience, are starting to have more influence again. And if that's true, it could explain why certain decisions feel more calculated, more controlled. Not reactive, but corrective. Because when leadership starts reasserting itself behind the scenes, it usually means confidence in the current direction isn't as strong as it once was. And if that's the case here, then this isn't just about performance anymore. It's about control. Control over the system, the identity, the future of the franchise. And when that kind of power dynamic starts shifting internally, it rarely ends quietly. So now everything comes down to this. What happens next? Because at this point, the situation isn't building anymore, it's already here. The pressure, the attention, the internal adjustments, it's all happening in real time. And for Stephanie White, there are really only two directions this can go. Either things click or they don't. If they do, the narrative flips fast. All it takes is a stretch of games where the system clearly runs through Caitlin Clark the way people expect. Faster pace, cleaner spacing, more control in her hands. If that happens, a lot of this noise disappears almost overnight. The same voices questioning things now will start pointing to adjustments and growth. That's how quickly momentum can shift. But if it does, that's where things get uncomfortable. Because this isn't the kind of situation where you get months to figure it out. The timeline already feels accelerated. Every game carries weight. Every decision is being evaluated not just for results, but for direction. Is the team clearly building around its star? Or is it still searching for an identity? That question is going to be answered very quickly. And then there's the other factor, the one that hasn't gone away. Lynn Dunn is already in the building, which means if a change needs to happen, it doesn't require a long transition. There's already experience, familiarity, and structure in place to step in immediately. And whether that's the intention or not, it creates a very real sense of urgency. Because now, it's not just about performance. It's about timing. If adjustments don't show up early, the window to fix things might close faster than expected. And once that decision is made at the top level, it usually happens quickly. No drawn-out process, no slow transition. Just a move. So now the pressure isn't just building, it's peaking. And the next few games, they might end up deciding everything. And when you take a step back and look at everything happening, this isn't just a coaching situation anymore. It's a turning point. Because what's unfolding right now in Indiana isn't loud, but it's very clear. The expectations have changed, the timeline has sped up, and the margin for error, it's basically gone. For Stephanie White, this isn't about long-term development or slow adjustments anymore. This is immediate, this is results-driven, and more importantly, this is about alignment. Alignment with the system. Alignment with the front office. And most importantly, alignment with Caitlin Clark. Because whether people want to say it out loud or not, this era belongs to Clark. The attention, the expectations, the growth of the franchise, it all runs through her. And when that's the reality, every decision made around her carries more weight than usual. That's why this situation feels so intense. It's not just about wins and losses. It's about whether the person leading the team is the right fit for what the team is becoming. And that's a completely different conversation. Because if everything clicks, if the system opens up, if the offense flows through Clark naturally, if the results follow, then this entire narrative disappears. It turns into a story about early struggles and eventual growth. But if it does, then this moment right here becomes the beginning of something else. A change. And not a slow one either. Because the pieces are already in place, the pressure is already there, and the organization has made it clear, whether directly or indirectly, that they are not willing to wait around if things don't move in the right direction. So now it comes down to execution. Not later. Now. Because in a situation like this, you don't get unlimited chances. You get a window. And that window, it's closing faster than most people realize.